Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Jack Naglieri, who is the CEO and co-founder of Panther. Before starting Panther, Jack was a security engineer at Yahoo and Airbnb, where he learned firsthand how inefficient legacy SIEM platforms are at high-scale detection and response. He built Airbnb's open source platform called StreamAlert to solve this problem before leaving to start Panther, which now has customers like Dropbox and Snowflake. I want to back up one second and explain that Panther is a leading security monitoring platform that enables security teams to create developer-centric detection and responses for response workflows. We're going to talk to Jack about all of that, what Panther does, and what's the current security kind of landscape. What does it look like? Talk about legacy SIEMs, some issues with them, and more. But before we do that, I want to say hi to Jack. Jack, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mark?
Pretty good. I'm up in Seattle, and I looked at your LinkedIn profile. It looks like you're down the coast in the Bay Area.
Yes, that's right. I'm in San Francisco.
Oh, you're in the city?
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm at our headquarters, actually.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I love that city, and it's always in the news. For these days, it's not to get political right off the bat, but it's kind of like this amazing city in so many different ways that is serving as this kind of political, social kind of petri dish for experimentation, and it's kind of like a leading indicator of a lot of different things, and it must be really exciting to live there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, being in Silicon Valley is unlike anywhere else in the world if you're going to build a startup, and the sheer amount of knowledge and advice and people and founders and employees as well, and just really great talent here is just really incredible. And obviously with remote first, a lot has changed, and Panther is a remote first company. We have people everywhere, but we also do have a physical headquarters in the Bay Area, and we actually have a large amount of our teams in town right now. So it's a packed office for once, which is a fairly uncommon occurrence these days.
Yeah, it's funny. I just got back from Europe. The company I primarily consult with is based in Budapest, and we had about 100 people there for a 3-day face-to-face meeting, and it's a lot of work getting everybody there. But since we've all been, or most of us have been remote for the last couple of years, it was really actually beneficial to bring everybody together. And I think you need that. I mean, that human touch element is still quite important.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, I miss it. I think doing too many meetings over Zoom can really fatigue you, where you sort of miss out on the human elements of talking to another person. And when we pass our voice and our video through a computer, it gets compressed and dehumanized. And it's a thing I think about a lot, just being from Zoom call to Zoom call, and completely changing it up and having meetings in real life just feels very refreshing.
Absolutely. One of the issues that I've had is I'm more easily distracted on a Zoom call. So, I have to hide my phone, and I have to close down, shut down all the other tabs, and I have to really try hard to focus. And in the beginning, I was just terrible at it. I'm more aware and getting better at it now, but it's a challenge for everybody. Yeah. Hey, one other thing, back to your original comment about Silicon Valley, and how exciting and amazing it is to work there. It's funny because I've lived overseas for about 20 years, off and on, and worked for European and Asian and American companies. And people always ask me, like, what do you miss about America? And what do you think is great about America? And I said, well, to be honest, the nature. I mean, things like the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, the California coast, Hawaii. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. But the other thing is the business environment, and specifically Silicon Valley is, it sounds cliche, but it is definitely the most unique business center on the globe, on the planet. And when you work if you work with Europeans and you work with Asians and you understand the mentality, where that is very different, and specifically in terms of like risk averseness. And a lot of the places where I've lived, people are they're more afraid of failing than they are excited about succeeding. And if you fail once, then you're blackballed, you're blacklisted, that's it. And if and that's true if you're in Switzerland, if you're in Japan, it's a really people are super risk averse. And one of the great things where you're at is it's all about risk and taking the right risks and things like that. So I mean, that must be really cool for you.
Yeah, I mean, I love the lack of risk aversion here. And I think as a startup, you have to keep that as long as you're around. The whole idea with high growth companies is you have to take risk after risk after risk to hit that growth. So it's not just you build a company once and it just works forever. It's a constant reinvention. And that's what we've seen in the last 4 years. The things I was doing the first year are completely different from year 4, which is what we're on now. And it's completely different from what we're going to do next year. And we're constantly evolving, and you have to. Things are changing. Things change a lot, Markets change, people change. Everything is always different.
Yeah, technology changes. The threat landscape, the protection landscape, it's always changing. Why don't you walk us through, kind of the shorthand version of what you were seeing in your roles as a security engineer at Yahoo and Airbnb that led you to develop some kind of alternatives to legacy SIEM platforms?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's not a secret. SIEMs are terrible systems just in general. I mean, I think in the last 10
some
years,
SIEM manufacturers might disagree with you on that, but please go ahead.
Who would disagree?
Some of the SIEM providers.
Yeah, well, I think the majority of the market would disagree with them then, because I mean, it's probably like the most dissatisfied product I would see in security. And it's a thing that everyone wants to be good, but no one's truly cracked yet, in my opinion. I think that, I mean, Splunk and Elastic and those tools still own the majority of the market because the specialized tools haven't been either scalable enough or flexible enough to really adapt to like what we're actually doing in the field. And it's just been a really big struggle for many years. It's been a struggle because they're very difficult and expensive to scale. They were really not built for the era of the cloud. And like I was just saying, that they're not built for what we're typically doing in incident response. And what ends up happening is you have to fragment between all these different tools, and you have to build all this scaffolding tooling around the SIEM for it to work, and you have to manage your data pipelines because the SIEM doesn't scale and all these different things. So after doing that dance for many years and just not having the data that we needed, not being able to access it fast enough, I joined Airbnb, and my manager at the time had this idea to use cloud native services like Lambda and Kinesis and these other like real-time streaming things to effectively build this more scalable, more sophisticated security analysis pipeline. We called it StreamAlert, and we called it a serverless data analysis framework. And that's effectively what it was. It was streaming data analysis. And that's effectively what you're doing at the SIEM. You're analyzing data, and then you're determining if something is suspicious. And I like to break it down to 3 different ways. It's like something informational that you just need to know happened. There's something that might be suspicious, and there's something that's like totally suspicious. And depending on which 3 it is, you take different actions. The middle one is probably the most common just because we're trying to get a lot of signal all the time. And then that's sort of the investigation workflows. A lot of which we're getting to a good point now where we can automate a lot with things like Tines, and even with a lot of the things we're developing in Panther, it's very similar. But it's just this idea, this core idea of, can we get all of the data in, and then can we use things like code instead of some specialized language to do our detection and response, and then when we search our data, using a data warehouse instead of using a index-based thing that is very tied to compute, very slow, very difficult, very expensive. So it was really technological foundations is what spawned us to do this, because we knew that it was the thing, the architectures were holding us back from actually running at the scale we needed to. And that sort of snowballed into what we're doing today, which is a very very deep continuation of that work by using cloud native and using things like Snowflake as our data lake and really building on those core concepts and then beginning to make it much easier to get the benefits of these highly sophisticated systems that alleviate a lot of the benefits, alleviate a lot of the challenges of old SIEMs. So that's where we are today. So we're a cloud native SIEM. I still will call us a SIEM. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the easiest acronym to wrap your head around. I'm not in the camp of like, oh, we're XDR, oh, we're next gen SIEM. Like, okay, you can only say next gen for so many years. We've been saying next gen for like 5 years. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I think we're kind of just doing the same thing. So maybe like spicy take, but I just feel like a lot of vendors have been doing kind of the same thing, and we're trying to be different by taking a very technological, architectural foundation that's based in cloud native, and then using that to really build the things on top that make it easier for people to get the benefit of that sophistication.
Well, so that leads me to the next question of you mentioned that there's been an evolution of the platform since you founded the company. Explain like what has been the biggest shift or the biggest change in direction that you've seen.
So there's a few different waves. The first one was, let's take what worked in StreamAlert and sort of rebuild from scratch with the lessons learned. When we built StreamAlert originally, there was just a few just natural limitations of the platform where we'd always wanted to re-architect it to scale better. And that's kind of where that was my start point. So very early on, it was just, let's use a more performant language. Because we're analyzing streaming data, so we need performance. And then from there, let's build a UI. And that was like V0 of Panther. It was just same concepts as StreamAlert with a UI, with a better architecture, more scalable, etc. And then as it evolved, we begin to think about more ways of getting data into the platform. We effectively have an ETL system in Panther, and it allows people to send any data that they have that's security relevant. So if we don't support it, you can generate a schema, and then the schema effectively does the conversion, and then it makes it to where when you send us unstructured data, on the other end of that is a data warehouse, which is extremely, extremely powerful and takes people probably a year to build on their own properly. So the benefit of that is huge. And then really now the evolution that we're going through now is going from this really strong technological foundation to thinking about how do we take what security teams are actually doing and productize it and make sure that the tribal knowledge that we have as practitioners is put into the product to sort of give to other people who may not have that tribal knowledge. What I mean by that is when you think about response, for example, there's a lot of ways to do response from an incident. And those start and end points may not be entirely clear to someone who's new to incident response, because it is a very interesting art. There's no right way to do it, but you're effectively playing investigator. So anything that we can do in the platform to attach evidence into alerts, to allow for automated remediation or things similar to that help us get more signal, more context, and take the things that we were doing manually and bring it into our product, that's what's going to be the most successful, in my opinion. And that's really what our focus is right now, is making the technological foundations not as scary for people to access, because it can be sort of daunting if you don't come from that world. But it was a very important place to start, because you can't really solve the workflow problem without a strong technical base, which to me is really where a lot of SIEMs have failed. They haven't established strong enough technical bases, and then they fail to scale when it actually comes to game time. And we hear this all the time in security, where they're like, oh, the SIEM demoed great, and there's all these dashboards, and there's these UEBA and like all this stuff, and then we deployed it in production and it was useless. And so many people who are probably listening to this are like, yep, that's happened a lot. So I'm trying to avoid that fate and actually build a SIEM that is matching what we're doing in reality and isn't really all dashboards and shiny objects and no actual value. And that's really my focus in the next. It's going to take years to do this right, it's not by any means an easy thing. If it was an easy thing, then someone would have done it already. So that's kind of what I'm dedicating my life to, more or less, is figuring this out, so we can be better security teams, and we don't have to deal with the pain of I'm not getting choked up. It's just early.
Okay, I was like,
No, I
so,
dealt with
so
that pain a lot for many years. So just trying to make it better and make SIEMs not terrible anymore.
well, I mean, you must have been doing something right. I mean, you've landed some pretty big customers like Dropbox and Snowflake, and I'm sure there are others that you could drop in there as well. I got to ask you, when you go out and approach potential customers, what are their biggest concerns about deploying a solution like yours?
Well, I mean, the thing I'll say right away is they don't have to deploy anything. It's all SaaS. So just to sort of establish that,
Okay.
there's no such thing as on-prem Panther. It's all SaaS. So they literally click a button and then they have this unlimited scale SIEM available to them. So I think the biggest things, if you just think sequentially how to get a SIEM operational, you have to have data. So how easy is it to plug into our data pipelines? That question really depends on so many things. If you're a very prototypical cloud native shop, it's fairly simple. If you have a bunch of custom data streams and you have Kafka and you have your own sort of data thing internally that you have to plug into, it becomes a lot more challenging. But that's just data engineering. It's not clear cut, and everyone does it differently. So that can be one thing that we work around, but we try our best to work around it as best as possible, getting things into the cloud or building new things like we just released ingestion input for GCP PubSub. We had support for GCP blob storage, but PubSub is a streaming system. So if you're using that, which most GCP shops are, then we can get that data into Panther now, which is great. So the ingestion's one thing. We try to spend time researching threats, and I hate saying that phrase because it sounds so buzzwordy, but we really research what are a good set of built-in detections that would help people have a strong baseline. And then we go through each log source that we support, like VPC flow logs and CloudTrail and Okta and Duo and et cetera. And then we release our packs, and then our customers can modify those packs to make it tailored for their environment. We're releasing a new version of our detections framework really soon too, and I'm like very, very excited about it. And it makes this process of modifying the upstream changes that we develop much, much simpler. And I'm very excited about that. And then besides that, it's just I would say searching data in the data warehouse is the thing that people get hung up on a little bit. It can be it's actually a fairly big difference in mentality of how you think about searching data. If you're not familiar with querying a data warehouse, I mean, it's literally a SQL statement. It's a select all from a table where field equals value. And I think people just aren't used to it for security. So we're in the process of building an easier interface to it so they don't have to think so hard during response. Because at the end of the day, the things we care about the most are speed and efficacy of our detection. And we're going to do whatever we can to make those metrics go up and to the right. So that's a little bit of what the current state of the world is, but the benefits are massive because you can get all of your data into one place. You can have a system to where you don't need separate ETL platforms. We can do the ETL for you. You can stream, analyze all of your data, no matter what the scale is. I mean, we have customers sending us upwards of like a petabyte of data per month, and it's a pretty real scale. So being able to analyze the things as they stream and get that real-time feedback is so valuable for improving our agility as incident responders and as detection engineers. And then again, being able to retain all that data in a structured format is hugely valuable. And being able to just pick a month and be like, okay, I want to look at everything that happened in June of this year or June of last year or June of the year before that. And we just didn't have that ability before. And that was a huge challenge because we would get breached, and then you'd look back and you're like, oh, we have a month of data. We don't know what happened. That's a horrible place to be in. And then you're getting fined. You're not being able to be transparent enough to your users. You have to reset everything. It's just such a terrible story. And there's these really core fundamental things we can just build and solve that. And that was, again, like the basis of where we wanted to start. And now the goal is to just smooth out those workflows and make it more approachable for the non-technical folks.
So you mentioned in there, you know, the ability to focus on certain types of threats. What are you seeing in terms of the threat landscape, and what kind of incident detection is most active from your platform?
It's a good question. I mean, we're seeing phishing all the time, and that's fairly common. If you look at the most common breaches that have happened recently with Uber and others, it's always phishing. I mean, humans are always the weakest link, so it's not like it's anything new. And ransomware, also, it's nothing new. We've been dealing with these things for years, so I don't think it's like a groundbreaking difference. It's just more of it. And yeah, I think it really varies, because I think everyone has the same handful of detections we care about in every environment, and then there's stuff that's unique to their environments. So that's kind of the challenge as a vendor, is you can't, like, one size does not fit all. And that's the challenge with SIEM, is that every business is different, every environment is different, and what you're protecting is different. We try to make the platform flexible enough to where you get the benefit of the built-in stuff we've created, and we try to add new things as new attacks pop up, like Log4j and relevant 0 days like that. And then our goal is to make it easy for customers to be like, okay, this upstream detection is really cool, but I want to contextualize it a bit more for my environment. And that's really where the power of a SIEM comes into play. And then that's where also the power of like a community comes into play, because people can share things and upstream them. And we do have an open source repository that has our detections. It has schemas and other content that goes into the platform.
Cool. Hey, earlier you mentioned that, with a lot of the more traditional tools, there's this great demo period, and then when they actually go to turn the tool on, make it live, that it doesn't do, or doesn't live come close to what it was promised to do. How can somebody, what's a best practice that you would advise to evaluate a potential tool, whether it's yours or anybody else's? In fact, how should a prospective customer evaluate your tool prior to purchase?
It's a great question. I would say scale is part of it. So can this thing materially handle like a significant fraction of scale, even if it's for a few days? Obviously, it costs money to do this, right? It's not free. But typically in our trial period, we give people a chunk of data for free. So if they wanted to feed, 100 gigs or whatever, 2 terabytes a day or something, like, we could figure something out. But we actually are launching a self-serve, and you'll be able to go to our website, panther.com, and get a trial instance of Panther. So we give people about half a terabyte to a terabyte of data for free.
But I guess my point is how do they know what they're looking at?
Yeah, I'm getting.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just pointing out, like, this ability of starting, right? Like, you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to deploy. And a lot of teams don't want to always talk to salespeople, so just making it clear, like, you don't
need to.
You can support on your own.
Okay.
So I would say it's starting with obviously getting a system, getting access to something, and then onboarding a log source that you're often responding in, and do a drill. Like, try to build a detection, do the full end-to-end response, and see how it feels. And get some custom data in that you haven't ever been able to get in before. Write a detection that has been previously challenging, and really use the 3 core parts of the system, which is getting data in, analyzing data, and responding to alerts. And just do an exercise. Pick one particular type of attack and just model it, and play like red team, blue team, and go from there. That's how I would do it. I think Yeah,
Go ahead.
when we do POC, it's a lot of getting data in and ensuring scale viability and just light end-to-end flows. But I don't know if teams are actually doing like red team, blue team type of exercises, but things like that are a pretty good way to evaluate the tool because that's in reality what you're going to be doing for months and years. So it should feel good and it should plug into all your systems where you're doing communications, messaging, and things like that.
I think, a big chunk of the corporate world right now is on M365 and also sizable chunk is on Azure. And Microsoft offers Sentinel, for example, which is not a full-blown SIEM, but it is, I believe, native to the cloud. How do you play alongside because all of those Azure and many of the M365 users already have access to Sentinel. They may not be turning it on, but they do have access to it. And there's, it's free to a certain level, so there's kind of an incentive to use it. But what's how do you play alongside, or do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, every major cloud is going to try and do something like this. And I think the benefit of being a standalone company is that we don't have to be overly biased to one particular set of logs. And we can build an integration to Azure, and we already have an integration for Office 365. And I think the reality is that most companies aren't in a single cloud, especially the enterprise. And you're totally right that a lot of people are using Azure and Office 365, but a lot of people are using AWS as well and Google. So that's kind of where we play today is on the latter. And the benefit for us is we can partner with everyone. We can partner with every cloud. We can be neutral. We can partner with the EDRs. We can partner with the clouds. We're all kind of converging into the same place. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next few years, especially with like some of these acquisitions like what Google's made recently with Mandiant and Simplify and things like that. And then I'm sure Microsoft wants to play a lot harder. And I know Sentinel's been doing well. But the thing is SIEMs need to be able to have all of the data in one place. And it's a little bit of a hard story as the cloud vendor or as the EDR vendor to go and partner with another EDR vendor or another cloud that you may not be close with. And again, we're all sort of converging in the same place. And I think it's just the biggest thing that's going to differentiate us is how easy is it to work through and do incident response. And that's where we hope to really take our experience that we have from doing this for many years and using that tribal knowledge and sort of building it into those workflows and making sure that people can respond quickly and intelligently.
Thanks for that. What's your biggest challenge right now in terms of scaling your company?
Oh man,
where to start?
Yeah, I mean, the way I always explain it is to build a correct startup or to build a startup that survives, you have to get three things right. It's you have to build a great product, which is the first thing. I mean, you don't exist without a product. You have to hire a great team, and you have to have a great market. And we're blessed to be doing well in all three. There's a lot in product that we always are going to want to evolve. There's people we're going to always need, and there's always new markets to go after. But as long as you get those three elements right and you continually evolve all three of them, then you'll survive. So I can't say hiring's our biggest challenge right now. I mean, we've grown quite a lot, and we've really brought a really great team together, and I'm very happy with the work that we've done there in recruiting and structuring the team and growing our executive team and everything. So I'm feeling really good about that. My biggest focus right now is just, again, thinking about how to build workflow into the product and how that changes how we go to market as well. And like I mentioned as well, we've introduced a self-serve so people can go to our website and try Panther. And that's going to change a lot of how we think about evolving our product and the speed in which we evolve. And it's quite a big change. So it's not a struggle. I think it's just more of we're sort of undergoing that evolution right now. But if you asked me that question, a year or two ago, it would have been like hiring's hard because at that time in 2021, 2020, when everyone went full remote, it just became so insanely competitive. And then now in the market where we've seen the slump, lots of layoffs, it's a lot easier to hire now because job security is the thing that's actually like pretty challenging. And a lot of people are very worried about it, especially with, like, for example, with Twitter. A lot of people are just kind of waiting. They're like, oh my God, what's going to happen with Elon coming in as our new boss? And we've seen
Well,
that
then,
a lot.
and I don't know if you saw that the I think Bloomberg released an article saying that the U.S. government was going to potentially look into this acquisition as it may have ramifications for national defense. And I forget the actual regulations and operating group that they cited that takes responsibility for these type of things. But just that sent the stock tumbling like 20%. And it's that's kind of crazy that the government would actually because he's saying things that they don't want it to say. But that all adds to the uncertainty. If you're working at Twitter, it's not like what is Elon going to do, but also what's the government going to do?
Yeah, it's a good point. And being a public company, they're under much more scrutiny as well. So yeah, it's I mean, look, it's not easy to build a company. It's actually not easy to run a company either, and nothing's ever guaranteed. I mean, I think about Airbnb all the time. I used to work at Airbnb, as you mentioned in the intro, and they had a very existential moment during the pandemic because everyone basically stopped traveling. And they've been a company that's evolved so much over the years, and they've done whatever it took to survive. And I think you always have to be in that mindset as a founder. Is you always have to be in survive mode, no matter what it is, and you have to make hard decisions constantly. So there's always hard things to do. It's not an easy job, and that's why the risk is so high. But that's why the rewards are really high too, and it can be very fulfilling to build a company from scratch and to have a huge group of people employed to work on a mission and to make the world a little bit better, or to make one part of the world a lot better. And that's what we're all working towards, right? Like that's a way we can gain some motivation every day to
No,
wake
it's
up
it's
and
nice to wake up in the morning and have a mission, and know what
sure.
you're excited about. It's funny. In my experience, like hiring is one of the most important things that you can do, and it's even in good times, it can be hard to get it right because how do you really know how a person's going to, play out in that role? And you can go through multiple rounds of interviews, but there's a very big difference between interviews and actually doing the work. And so I feel, there's a lot an element of risk when you hire, right? Because you're going to invest this time and energy, well, one in the recruitment process, then on the onboarding, and then you're going to give them their role. And if they get it right, it's awesome. It's nothing better when you hire the right people. But if you get it wrong, and it can be a painful experience. I find there's a parallel with managing product because I'm sure that you've got, a million different options in terms of, the direction you can take your platform and the different features that you can add and what different customers are asking you for. And you kind of have to place your bets on, which ones are going to have the biggest impact or maybe the quickest impact. You have to have some type of heuristic to decide. Maybe walk us through, like, how do you decide the direction, and then even down to like some of the features, because every customer always wants something extra.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a very hard thing to do in general. And it's always a delicate balance. So if we break it into a few groups, the first is what do we need to do to make our current customers happy? The second part is what do we need to do to innovate? And the third part is quality of life and managing the features we've shipped. So it's always risk reward, right? So it's what's the revenue opportunity for working on this feature? You basically do rice scoring, and our PMs do this, and they'll present us a score and be like, hey, we think we should do this right now because of these reasons. It's going to have this reach, this impact, etc. So they work really hard to do that research ahead of time, and then they sort of present it upward, and then we're like, yeah, that makes sense based on what we're hearing, and it makes sense also in the direction that we need to go. So yes, please go do that. Green light. So
I
it's
I like that you're asking them to do the research up front instead. I mean, every company has a slightly different method, but more often than not, I've seen it that, our customers are asking for this, or your sales team will come back, or your BDMs or whoever saying, hey, the customer really needs this. This is what the market's telling us. And you would kind of have to drill down and say, well, is that what they really need, or is there another way that we can do this? And two, like, what's the ROI on if we do this? And if,
yeah.
if they come in with that, it makes the whole discussion much easier.
Yeah, it's all input. I mean, you obviously need to listen to your customers, but you also need to connect the dots as well of what they're saying. And the innovator's dilemma is you have to pick and choose how you interpret that. So yeah, because if you always listen to your customers, they may actually steer you in the wrong direction. Funny
Right.
enough.
Because
So
they might have the old paradigm in mind, right? Oh, well, our old
exactly.
SIEM used to do that. We want it to do that. And you're like, but that's not the point of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and I think we less so get dragged down that road of people wanting us to go back to the old way. I think they're more so just talking about problems they're having. Okay, we're
Mm,
trying to search on data easier. We're trying to write XYZ type of detection or whatever it may be. Or we want to get new data sources in. There's this new SaaS app that we started using, and there's always evolution. There's always ways of making it better. But again, going back to the core focus of fast and effective, fast and intelligent, whatever it is you want to think about. But speed is very important in incident response in general. So
awesome.
whatever we're doing, it should really play into that strength.
Well, hey, just two more questions for you. One is I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you actually invested in a couple other security startups, Run Zero and Tromso. And
Mm-hmm.
there's possibly more. I'm not sure. Uh,
Yeah.
so you're in the epicenter of IT and security startups. What advice would you give to anybody thinking to either found a startup or join a startup in this space?
It's very different advice. But I would say if you're going to found a startup in the space, well, one, it should be based on, in my opinion, it should be based on real world experience that you have in solving some problem. And, doing the basic checks of like, has anyone done this before? Or this is why we're going to be different and 10 times better, and then really committing to that. And as a founder, like the advice I would give is it's really a long game if that's what you want, right? Like some people could create a startup just to get acquired, but if you really want to build something largely impactful for a very long time, it's like a 10-year journey. And being very upfront about that's really important. And the next thing I would say is just visualize where you want to go and consistently iterate on that vision. Every year you should have a new endpoint. And I think this is more life advice than founder advice. They're kind of the same. But you have to know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. So write down where it is you want to be in 6 months or 12 months and make it lofty and be like, I'm going to go for that. And people in Silicon Valley really want they want to get behind a mission. They want to get behind this idea of the world being a little different. And as a founder, you have to have that ambition and you have to be able to reiterate that constantly. This is why we're building a new, better SIEM. This is the problems that we're solving. This is the pain we're solving. This is why. Leaning into why is so important. It's not about what you're doing. It's about why you're doing it. To reference Simon Sinek. So having
I was just going to mention,
message.
and I've actually sent that out to a couple of people a few times when they're saying, we're having trouble connecting people with the mission. Like, well, this is one thing that you can watch. There's obviously a lot of other, I guess, messages that you can bake in as well. But understanding why is super important. Agreed.
Yeah, that's core human motivation in general. If you tell someone, "Hey, do this," they're gonna be like, "Why? Why do you want me to do that?" Oh,
well, I don't know if you have kids, but I have 3 boys, and that's like that's as soon as they can start to communicate, that is the number one question. Yeah, hey, go clean your room. Why? Because I told you to. So
That's a bad answer. Yeah, like I think about that all the time too. I'm not a parent, but I guess I have a lot of metaphorical children in a company, right? Like I'm responsible for 100 people. So a lot of the techniques that we use to motivate the company, I would imagine are similar to what you would do to have a family and to manage your family, even though a company is not a family, which is another important tip for
Yeah,
founders.
you can't threaten
companies
to you can't threaten to pull out the stick and chase your kid around even your metaphorical ones with it. But no,
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. It's just not effective.
no,
Like berating people is not going to do anything. You know, you have to have a level head, and you have to think about like a team sport. You know, we're all working together towards shared missions, shared goals, and we're all trying to score as many points as we can, and really play on each other's strengths. So the team analogy is always really solid.
Awesome.
So
And the
that'd be
second part of my question was if you're thinking about joining a startup.
Mm. I mean, I guess the advice I would give is don't have an expectation that things are stable, because they're not, right? Startups are inherently dynamic environments, and you are joining a startup to make some part of that company great. So as long as you go in with that mindset, I think you'll end up having a much more impactful outcome. And I kind of wish I knew that before I went to Airbnb, because there's a lot of things at Airbnb at that time where I was like, whoa, I can't believe we're doing that. And in terms of like infrastructure and things like that, but it's honestly just because we were just trying to grow. They were growing so fast, right? And it's not the time for structure and for stability. It's the time to keep the train on the tracks and keep piling coal and just like make this thing go faster and build it a little taller, but structurally it's very hard to change things. So just being aware of that and having that expectation that, hey, things are probably gonna be very dynamic and maybe not as mature as you need. And I think depending on what stage of company you join, it will really vary. Feedback that I get quite a lot actually is because we've had a written culture and a remote culture for so long, people are like, whoa, the level of documentation you have is insane. And it's true. We have a lot of things written out. I started the RFC culture very early. So I guess it's another tip for founders is like start your written culture basically today. And I think we probably have less of a choice now being remote. I think that's more ingrained in us because there's no really other way. But yeah, that expectation setting is important for everything, but especially for people coming into a startup. And yeah, make sure you trust the team and you like the team. I think we don't emphasize enough of the human connection when we hire, and that's something that I always try to bring to the process. So
that's some more great advice. Okay, so my last question is, any closing thoughts, comments, and if anybody wants to find out more information about Panther or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, my closing thoughts are there's still a lot of work to be done on making security monitoring awesome, and our mission is really to alleviate a lot of this pain that SecOps practitioners have felt for the last 10 years. And we want to make sure that we deliver a SIEM that's fast and pragmatic. And I think as long as we do that, then we'll make people happy and we'll make their jobs easier and we'll prevent burnout and we'll actually allow people to be excited about using a SIEM. So that's a little bit of how I'm thinking about things, and we're continuously evolving. If you want to help join and make SIEM great, I highly recommend it. We've hired a lot of incredible people with a lot of amazing backgrounds in engineering and product and things like that. And we also have sales and a lot of other positions open. Our website's panther.com /careers is for jobs. And then if you click the button on the top right and you're curious about our product, you can try it for free for 30 days. You can connect with me on Twitter. My Twitter's twitter.com/Jack_Naglieri. First underscore last is my Twitter handle. And then I occasionally write things on Substack. There's a link to that in my Twitter profile. And yeah, and then we have a community as well. We have a Slack community where people will post about little tips and things that we're thinking about, how to do security better, how to do SecOps better, and trying to grow that as well. So that's all the things.
Awesome. Hey, Jack, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure the future is bright for you and the Panther team. Would just like to wish you guys a great remainder to 2022.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate you having me on.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.